growth requires more than capital.
Why do we call it the cheat code? Nobody said growth had to be fair.
Revenue solves everything.
Welcome to the cheat code. What was our fastest path to revenue?
We tend to like to do things the hard way.
What's the cheat code? It's giving yourself an unfair advantage over the others.
What is it that really works, and how are we going to grow these organizations?
That's our cheat code.
What's up? You're back once again on the cheat code. We've got with us today Mr. Sangram Vajre, who probably needs no introduction, and then I'll go ahead and give him one anyway. One of, just a figure who has really been, just that, a figurehead within B2B, within go-to-market across numerous different companies, and, has, in my opinion, one of the most inspiring backstories out there. So Sangram, welcome to the pod. Really great to have you here today.
Good to see you again. And if anybody's watching, like this, we're all wearing black. So we definitely.
That's right.
I'm wearing blue. I'm wearing in revenue capital blue. Give me a break here.
Dark blue. So yeah, for those out there listening, I am of course Justin Graham, joined once again by my illustrious co-host, Mr. Josh Wagner.
Oh.
So Sangram, how do you? I guess first and foremost, let's kind of give listeners an overview of what you're up to now, and maybe a bit about the journey that got you to where you're at.
Yeah. Well, maybe a best way, somebody shared this with me, one of the ways to summarize my entire last 15, 20 years is in 3 acronyms, which I'm not sure is that is like a compliment or it's kind of a nudge on how I think about stuff. But I ran marketing at Pardot that got acquired by ExactTarget and Salesforce, so marketing automation. So the first acronym is MA, so spent a good amount of time there. Then build Terminus all around ABM. So there you go. They're your second acronym for the last 8 years or so. And we had a private equity exit out of it. And then in 2019, I wrote my third book on go-to-market called Move. And that launched the go-to-market research and advisory firm called GTM Partners. So that's the third acronym, go-to-market, GTM. So MA, ABM, GTM, and that's my background.
Should we call that maturity?
Everything in B2B has to be summarized by an acronym, so it's fitting. Yeah. So again, I'd rather you just kind of tell the story, but I've spoken with you in the past. I think we've had you on different podcasts in the past as well, and I just think the story, obviously, kind of the immigrant story, the building through entrepreneurship, and how I frame it is, the ability to see opportunity and ultimately say yes to things. I think a lot of people kind of come with a no mentality, but you've got kind of your own terminology for this. So just walk us through, your cheat, and then I'd love to get into how that's kind of manifested itself.
Yeah, sure thing. The way I phrase that for myself is just becoming intentional. Many times I've recognized that we can be in too many things, into too many places, and trying too many different things. But anything that I found success, even the fact that I could summarize a 10-year, 15-year career in 3 acronyms, probably points to the point that you're opportunistic about what the next move is, but you're very intentional around what the storyline is for it. And once you have that, I feel it allows you to just have better bets. I'm learning that anything that I do, if I'm intentional around it, it just have a massive outcome. I could do 50 different things. We all get to a certain point in our lives and careers where you could probably have 4 different things going on. And we probably need that for our brains, for our brains to operate. But the area where it has an outsized impact are the areas in life, personally and business, is where you're just intentional about that one thing for a period of time. Somebody said to me some time ago, Justin, that, it's really like when you put your mind to something for even a couple of years and not be distracted by anything, but just for a couple of years, you're going to end up becoming the expert in that. And when you get your head out of the sand from that for after 2 years, you're going to be like a decade ahead of everybody else because they all sprinted in so many directions while you stayed on course for those 2 years. That might seem long, but that's really not too long when you accumulate amount of time and everything that we put out in the business world.
I think people generally have a hard time creating things, right? It's one of the hardest things to do. But when I think about your intentionality, it's brought you to just create stuff, right? Like you created movements, Flip My Funnel, like these things, you've created things that just people don't do. So how do you harness that? Like, how do you say, okay, I'm intentionally focused on this thing? And then what is that next? How does it lead you to that next thing? Because I think you've created some incredible movements in your career.
Well, thank you, Josh. I think the big area when I think about even Flip My Funnel and that movement was, it always starts with desperation. And it all starts with, I wish I could say cleverness.
I love that.
Man, I was brilliant. Like, no, it all started with desperation. So being honest about that, it was like, okay, we launched Terminus and here we are, 3 co-founders in Atlanta. Nobody knows us. We don't have a lot of money. We are actually figuring out how do we find just one desk and one laptop to launch our startup because you don't want to buy 2 laptops, right? So that's how you start. And then I reach out to all these people to say, would they sponsor a Terminus event? And they say, no, why I'm going to sponsor a Terminus event? Like, you're launching, good for you, but not good for us. And then that's desperation. That's pure definition of desperation. And then you go back and then look at it and say, I reached out to them after buying this domain called Flip My Funnel for $8 and reaching out and saying, hey, how about each one of you are keynote at this industry event where we're going to have all of you keynote at this event. And all you got to do is show up for this one. And they show up, they pay for it. And we have 300 people that attend the first one, including the competitors in the marketplace. So in many ways, I think the best ideas come out of desperation, to be honest.
Yeah. So with that, concept in mind, let's take it all the way back to the beginning. Cause like I mentioned, like I love kind of your origin story of sorts. And so, I think it fits right in with that concept. Cause I think the number, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, is like $350
Yep.
literally in your pocket. So like walk us through, to Josh's point, how you walk into an environment and like out of utter, I have to make it happen, manifest something.
Yeah, it's in many ways, life, if you walk in life where there is no plan B, it's really how I think a lot of times as an immigrant, you kind of have to think about it. So when I
not to interrupt you, but like, do you think that is a critical must-have? Because I talk to so many people, and obviously the tendency is that they want to have a plan B, right? Like it's always like, hey, I'm going to dip my toe in the water. Like, do you think that that's critical? Like, do you have to remove all other options?
The audacity, I talk to founders a lot of times who like want to do startup or want to be founders, want to be startup. And they're like, hey, I'm trying this thing. And I tell them up front, the audacity for somebody to say, I'm going to just go ahead and try something for the next 3 to 6 months while I'm working 40, 50 hours a week. At the same time, there are a couple of people out there who are working their tail off. They are working so hard to make ends meet and figure things out. The audacity that you think you'll be able to leapfrog all of that and be able to have a successful startup while you're doing other things is a fallacy. It's not going to happen. So, and there is obviously that one exception that everybody wants to talk about, but the reality is that's just not possible, especially when you're kicking something off. You have to put everything into it, almost like pour your soul into it to birth something as a company and a startup, given the odds of not working. So even going back to that point, and when I came to India, not knowing that that entrepreneurship is going to be my path, I had $350. I came to the States for my master's from University of Alabama, which is a culture shock for somebody to come from India to Alabama. I just want you to picture an Indian guy walking on the streets of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, with a broken English, trying to figure out all the different language barrier of Southern way of doing things and talking. It was just like crazy. And I'm looking around to figure out how do I get some sort of assistantship or something to pay for my semester, because I had a loan for the first one. And I found that in every university, apparently there is a department called critical languages. And you find that if you go into critical languages department and you identify that there's a new language that you can teach, you can turn that into a course or a class. And so I ended up finding American kids who had Indian boyfriend or girlfriend. And if you get 3 people to sign up for your class to teach Hindi, I would get my entire assistantship paid for. So I persuaded them to like, you got to know each other's languages and native. I didn't even know how to do all that, teach all that. And once I persuaded them to sign up for this course, so you get to spend more time together, you get to do classes. Like I did all kinds of sales at that moment, and they did sign up. And then I bought on Amazon at that time, I bought the Hindi book of how to teach Hindi because I didn't know how to teach Hindi. I've never done that. So it all started with like pure desperation. Like I had no plan B. I had no choice. I had to make it work. And I was finding a way to do this.
Dude, that's incredible. So you taught this course for how long? And it got how many semesters paid for? The whole 4 years?
The whole 2 years for my master's. The whole
2 years.
All 4 semesters. I literally had 3 hours of work. Because that's all it was per week to teach, and it paid for my entire 2 years of it. And since then, they had other languages because other people starting to figure it out. But that's a if you one would might say that's a loophole in every university. Or one would say that that's like okay, well if there is nothing, then what do you do? Like you find something. Like that's what you do, and it was.
Did you create any long-lasting love stories is what the people really want to know.
Well, one was awkward because they broke up in the after the third, but they had to carry on to the 101, 201 level. So I had some of the matchmaking elements to it. But again, in University of Alabama, they're not like a whole bunch of Indians walking on the street.
Sure.
So this was such a small in our B2B world TAM to go after and in a segment to go after, but it was like the niche, like there's nobody else would do it. And that was the opportunistic. It's like really intentional. Like, all right, I can work at a gas station. I could do this, but there's no way it's going to pay whatever was my semester fees. The university has to find a way to pay for this. So I had to find something in the university so I had to just reduce the scope of things I could do and then started to look for what was possible in there.
That's incredible. Well, I don't want to derail the whole show, but I do have a question, Justin. Sorry. How does an Indian kid end up in Alabama? I always wonder this. Like when I think about, I went to Arizona State, which is a massive school, bigger than Alabama even, and we have tons of immigrants come there, and it kind of makes sense. It's a big research university,
big party school.
Yeah, it's a big party school. But I think my perception is most other cultures, they think of the United States, they think of New York and LA, and like that's it, nothing else exists. So how do you end up in the Southeast?
Well, I mean, the answer is again desperation. I think that's the theme of it. So when you apply through a GRE exam to do masters for any of the universities in the US, as you finish your test, they gave you 4 options based on your test score and stuff that are free applications. So I had a choice if I could use the $350 that I'm going to have for the application or a free application. And one of those universities was University of Alabama. I had no idea. I didn't even know where in the map
Very nice.
of Alabama really exists. So I'm like, I'm going to that one. So I
love it.
$50 and I showed up.
All right, Justin.
The thing is, none of my stories are glamorous.
No, I think it's awesome. All right, Justin, get us back on track. I took this off the rails.
They're focused, right? And so, all right, so like let's literally walk through this. So like it's next step. I'm always interested, like B2B marketing, to Josh's point, like in terms of like how people think about things. Like when you think about marketing, everyone, I talk to kids. I sometimes adjunct teach at ASU, and when people talk, they talk about Snapchat, they talk about TikTok. You know what I mean? Like they talk about Frito-Lay and Pepsi and consumer brands. So how, B2B marketing, how did that come about, right? Because, obviously Pardot was right in the center of that whole thing and super early in the marketing automation space. I actually remember evaluating Pardot like in 2007, 2008, somewhere in there. And so like, why that jump? And, like, how does that intentional, theme kind of carry on through there?
Well, as I answered that, you triggered another thought for me. From an intentionality perspective, I'm only on LinkedIn. You mentioned about TikTok, Snapchat, and all of it. Like the only place I'm on is LinkedIn. Twitter, I used to be. I don't even know if I know my password on Twitter. Hopefully nobody gets.
You've been hacked.
There's a fake Sangram running around.
Yeah, I think there might be. like in Snapchat and TikTok, and I looked at it, but that goes back to intentionality. They thought like, well, if you're going to be in B2B, LinkedIn is probably not going away. Like that's probably going to stay. Everything else is going up and down. And yes, you could figure something out, but if I want to build a long-term relationship, followership, and a brand, then I have to pick one and not five. And I still feel like a lot of right now, people are like, oh yeah, you can just cross-promote everything everywhere. Well, you're everything everywhere with 0 followers and 0 likes, 0 engagement. And so yes, you are everywhere, but you're nowhere because none of it is contextualized with the environment that you're in. And we all know how hard it is to make sure that what you're talking about is aligned with what it is, how hard it is to be consistently posting something of value for your community to be able to engage. So all of that takes intentionality. So we just triggered that thought because somebody was like, well, I'm trying this and this, so I think I could do that. I'm like, yeah, you can do everything, but you end up having nothing. So that's back to intentionality around it. The other part of how I got into marketing was, you know, I got my first job. Even that one was like through Deloitte. Like Deloitte hired me because the only person who applied to work for Deloitte was from a master's program was me. When they came to the university, because everybody applied from bachelor's because they only paid $42K or something like that. I'm like, I don't care. I can sleep on the floor. Having a Deloitte stamp on my, well, no, your master's, right? You should expect 65K or 60K or whatever. I'm like, I don't care. So the only person who applied for a Deloitte job was me. And I got a job at Deloitte, which was like shocker for most things. For me, it was like the best thing that happened, that kicked off an understanding of how do you work in the business world. So that gave me a lot of experience in the consulting work for the first couple of years. And then I had a couple of other jobs, but there was a time when I worked for a company where I was supporting the marketing department and helping them launch websites, helping them launch another set of things. And I'm like, whoa, you can actually change revenue and emotions on how people are engaging with you literally like this. You could change your website, you could change your call to action, you can change your messaging, and it could change buyer based on the buyer behavior. Like all these things were so new to me that you can immediately have an impact in something. So that got me super excited. So I was like a director or something for an IT operations company. I took another leap from there and I became an analyst, like a business analyst, like a junior analyst who in the marketing department, because I just wanted to learn marketing at a startup. And I did that for 6 months or so, and they made me the director of strategic marketing because all I could do was like new ideas. I didn't care where the end game was. Like I just want to explore.
Mm-hmm. So that's why I love startups, though. You can, one day you're an analyst, the next day you're the director of strategic marketing.
Exactly.
Like just what job you want, and they just changed that into. And again, the compensation wasn't like 10x great. It allowed me to just experiment, do tests, and try new things because I said I'm gonna figure this thing out. Like that's part of what we all do, and that got me into marketing because I felt like that part of ability to immediately change something in the marketplace that can have a lasting impact is something that I just don't know any other field does that.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I'm thinking about you've taken all these steps that you've intentionally said didn't have a big paycheck associated to them. So there's something about that because you certainly created outsized outcomes for yourself in your career, right? But there were things that you did early on to gain experience, to get in there, to get in the door, to learn, to analyze, to be curious. How do you, and I know you mentioned desperation, but I think there is such a sense of entitlement coming out of school, or maybe you get this gig, so the next gig needs to be better. Like, how do you have that long-term view of using this to get there instead of I need this paycheck now?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely has worked out for me. What I feel is that when I think about a career for people who may be starting off, like your first 10 years is just finding yourself. You don't know what you're really good at. I didn't become an actual entrepreneur until I was 36. So I came here to the States when I was 25. And then for the next 10 years, I just tried all these things. I wasn't even in the ballpark of entrepreneurship for the first 10 years. I just wanted to learn. I just wanted to do good work. I just wanted to see what am I capable of. And that's all it was. So if one could take a step back and start looking at like the first 10 years or so of your life is working life, is to just figure out and look and see and say yes to things that you are totally uncomfortable with, but it might help you move. And if there's something that gets your attention, then go in it and launch yourself. Forget the money part, because the first 10 years you can afford to do that. After you get to that first 10 years, and then you figure out, oh, this is what I'm good at. And people tell you that this is what you're good at. For me, it was a moment where they said, man, you're really good at storytelling. And I'm like, I don't even speak proper English. Like, if you read any of my LinkedIn, it has typos and all of it. I don't even write properly. I don't know how without an editor, I wouldn't even be allowed to write a book, right? Like, so all of these, so this thing is, but I'm good at telling the story. I'm good at bringing people into the story. I'm good at helping people see themselves in the story. So somebody told me that some time ago, and that made me recognize that, okay, that's what I need to do more of. But I wouldn't know if I wouldn't have tried it. So if one could take the chip off their shoulder for the first decade of their career and life until they figure out. For some it might take 20 years. Who knows? Or some it might be 2 years. But if you take the chip off your shoulder and say that it's not about me, I just want to figure out who I am, then I think there is a chance for you to have an outsized impact in whatever field that ends up becoming.
Yeah, I think that. So I was talking to someone the other day who mentioned, when he was 50 some odd years old, right? Like, went back and did, a really deep dive, a candid deep dive into anyone that he had worked with or that had worked for him. Like, how do you think about me? What am I good at? And I think that perspective that you mentioned is so critical. Not just what do you think you're good at, right? But like, how do other people view you? And when you come to mind, what is that skill set that's just predominant there? So that's super critical. So, but in terms of the ABM focus and really Terminus, which I believe that's kind of, you consider that your first entrepreneurial journey?
I think Terminus was well, before Terminus, I was that guy who tried to build a startup on weekends and was trying to figure that part out. And I realized that I spent 3 years working weekends and other things, that it just wasn't going to happen. So I had to have an honest conversation with my wife for Terminus. Like, if you're going to do this, I need to plunge in 100%. That literally meant, and she wasn't working at that time, we just had our second baby. That just meant that you need to go get a new job. Like, that had that conversation, and I'm so grateful that she gave me 1 year. She said, you got 1 year. In 1 year, show me this thing as legs. Otherwise, you need to go find a real job. And that was super important for me, because that's what, if you really look at what happened in the first year of Terminus, we wrote the first book, we did like 4 Flip My Funnel conferences. Like, nobody does 4 conferences in a year, especially in the first year, especially with no funding. Like, how do you do that? So, but for me, I didn't have a plan B. If I want to be an entrepreneur, and if this was my ticket, I had to try everything in that first year. If it didn't, I had to go find a real job. I didn't have a choice after that, because I could see my wife was working hard. We had other, and then plus kids. I mean, clearly women ends up taking the brunt of it. And I was seeing that happen over and over again. And I had to figure this thing out. So all I had was for the first year.
So was that idea born out of the Pardot journey then? Like when you talk to John Miller, like his, journey with Marketo was like, hey, I see this doesn't work for, a very predominant go-to-market motion. Is it the same kind of story through the Pardot lens?
Well, twofold. One was Terminus was started before I joined as a co-founder. It was about 6 months prior to me joining them as a co-founder, and it was
a bit of a different focus as well, correct?
Very different focus. Both the co-founders, they're focused on B2B advertising. Like, that's what. So I saw them at a startup, and at Atlanta Tech Village when they were doing a pitch, and I saw them what the pitch was. But the reason it attracted me was because when I was at Pardot, in the second year of it, we hit every record out there in terms of number of leads. Like, that was the big deal. It'd be like 30,000 leads in a month or something like that. We're high-fiving everybody around. And then my sales leader comes to me the next day and says, Sangram, you and your team did a great job. That's awesome. We just need 3,000 more leads starting next month. And I just fell off my chair. I'm like, what are you talking about? We just gave you the record number of leads. Like, what do you want? Because that's all I knew to do, and I did. And he's like, yeah, but we need more leads. You have a bigger quota, and he showed his spreadsheet and all that. And that was the first time I was like, why do you need 8x pipeline? Why can't we reduce the pipeline, right? Why are we not doing, we're at Salesforce. Why are we not looking at this and doing more cross-sell, upsell? He's like, yeah, but you just give me the, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm telling you what I want you to do, right? You just get on the, and I realized that I was nothing but a coin-operated lead machine.
Right.
That was the feeling I got out of that conversation. I'm like, all right, there's got to be a better way than just producing leads for my sales counterpart. And that really led me to explore what's possible. So when I saw what Terminus was doing, what they were doing, B2B advertising, and I'd literally spend a day with them after that pitch and say, guys, what we're talking, if you could do this at the account level, and they took a minute and they're like, yeah, we can do that at account level. We can do this. And if you could show this dashboard, and we even wrote on the whiteboards, B2B advertising, right? Account-based advertising. That was the first idea, and then it morphed into ABM. But that's really what brought me to the idea was, again, a really desperate moment where my sales leader is saying, you just got to give me leads. That's your job. Go do your job. And me recognizing that that's not the job I want to have for the next 2 years.
Yeah. So then to your point, like you essentially went on a road show with, the flip my funnel concept, which I think was absolutely genius. Like there were so many people, well, not a ton, but like, 3 or 4 core players in the space at that point, trying to all evangelize around this topic. And like you guys really, activated that through that flip my funnel conference, which I think a lot of people, some people didn't even know there was like a software component behind it. It was just, these guys are evangelizing this new go-to-market strategy. So, what gave you the confidence to kind of go all in on that as the go-to-market strategy there?
Well, there was no choice for us. It was no choice.
I love this consistent thing.
No choice. If you really looked at I had 1 year to make this thing work, so I didn't have time. So that was a desperate moment right there. 2, we're based out of Atlanta, no funding at that point. We just have basic level of funding to get going. So that's 2. And 3, we're talking about an entirely new concept. Like, who cares about us, like being in Atlanta and saying that we want to do something in the marketplace that changed? So the only way that I could think of, and I could look back and now and say, oh, that's a genius idea, but it wasn't like at the moment. It was the only way I could bring 300 people in one location talking about one idea and seeing if we can turn that out of those 300 people, some into our customers. I just didn't know any other way. We didn't have money like HubSpot to create an inbound engine and create like those. All things were too long of a way to get to the customer. So when we did the first event, which cost us at Terminus at that time $0 because everybody else paid for it, and we were a booth just like everybody else. And the first event we sold 25 deals. Now that made us like, okay, well, let's do 4 more, right? And we're gonna pay for it. And so it started. And then by the time we got to the 4th one, we didn't realize this, but what we ended up having was owning the narrative in the marketplace around ABM, because people knew that we were behind it and they were coming to us saying, all right, we hear this is the problem. We can see it. Yep. Flip funnel fun. Makes sense. We should do it. Well, what do you do? And that was a better conversation than, hey, picking up the phone and calling like, hey, we're a B2B advertising company. Like we do that. Like it was just a better way of having conversations. So we did not even hire anybody in marketing at that time. We had one person who was fully dedicated to flip my funnel for the entire year. We had 0 marketing budget and we have 0 Terminus marketing thing. Me and Sped, we built the website over the weekend and that's all it was. We didn't even change the website for a year. The entire go-to-market was flip my funnel because we were closing 25 deals every time we did it.
It's so crazy. You talked about controlling the narrative, and I think you did, right? And you eventually got to what one of your monikers was ABM as B2B, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of think that's where we landed.
Yeah.
I mean, all that, I don't know, Justin, how many years were we doing ABM projects for our clients at LeadMD? Maybe a good 5-year run.
I was going to say 6-7 years,
Yeah. But now I don't know that anyone's just saying ABM. I mean, I'm going to do an ABM project. It's like, hey, we're going to do a project. We have these target accounts. We have this, we have that. It's all wrapped in there. And I feel like you did control the narrative to like it crescendo to, listen, this is just how you go to market. It's part of the program. It's not special.
Yeah, it did. I wanted to make sure that did happen. And I'm so grateful that I did get the opportunity to pen it saying ABM is B2B period, because I felt like I could see it that this is not going to be a long-lasting trend. Like this should be how acquisition, pipeline velocity, expand, everything should be run this way because we are a B2B shop. Like we are not selling Nike shoe to any and everybody. There only is so many people who could buy and expand with us. And then that led, I think, with another gift I feel that I had over a period of time that I learned to accept and lean into. And that's part of, I think, what becoming intentional is all about. Lean in, accept the gift that has been given to you. A lot of times no, this is your gift, so do it, like own it and live it. So one of the gifts was just try to look into the future a little bit. And in 2019, when we wrote about go-to-market, not many people were talking about go-to-market at that time, or especially not as many people are talking about it right now. So it allowed to, the next thing is like, well, I don't want to be sitting on the same ship. So another big lesson for me is, okay, you invented something, you got to be part of something great. Now, again, take the chip off your shoulder and stop like being like the person who said, I did this, and move on to the next thing and see what's the next Everest looks like for you. Otherwise, you could just be sitting there saying that, look at what I did 10 years ago. I never want to be a person who looked back and saying, look what I did. I always want to be the person, hopefully we all want to, is what can we do next? What's the next level looks like here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, looking forward and being humbled is certainly something that Justin and I can relate to at this very moment. We think we created something pretty cool at LeadMD, but here we are in startup land, creating a new brand from nothing and being venture capitalists without being venture capitalists. Humbling to say the least. So we get what you're saying. Yeah,
but that's also something that is, I think, hard for a lot of people to do. And like, even it's one of those situations on like, hey, why are you doing this again? Right? Like. I guess you mentioned humility there, and also coupled with the concept of intentionality. Like, have you looked back at all to try to devise why you're able to apply that humility so effectively? Because I think a lot of people, after they've had wins, and certainly when you don't have to like worry about where the next meal is coming from type of situation, it's hard to maintain that hunger. But there are people out there, like yourself, that can just say, only what goes forward matters, right? Like, do you attribute that to anything? Like, is that something in terms of how you're raised? Like, what's the kind of input there?
Well, a big part of my life that changed in the last 10 years, especially because that's not how I always thought about it. To be perfectly honest, is my faith. I feel like that really did allow me to realize that I'm not God. Right? I think it's
a good realization for all of us.
Once you build something, you feel like you're touching everything and it's turning into gold, and you feel like, oh, I'm unstoppable, and people are like, oh, you did this, you're awesome, and for a moment, I was there. I was like, man, look at me, like I got this. I'm run. I look at me, and I feel like God humbled me very quickly. I was shared my wife, and I've shared about this, is like we were on the verge of divorce in my second year at Terminus, because I got so full of myself that it was like I didn't even know what I was walking in, and my wife is like, well, I don't even know who you are. And it was a reality moment for me to check my ego at the door and recognize what's going on and how I'm treating the people that are closest and the most people who actually did the most sacrifice for me. That led us into a faith journey that led us to recognize that I'm not God. Like, it's not me who is, and I need to attribute my success to a much higher power than myself. And when that happened, I feel like that changed the way we're thinking. So that's why even with go-to-market partners, we're looking at it saying this is something we want to do for a decade. It's in a previous life, I would say I want to be the one on the stage showing all the OS and showing all the thing. And if you come to any of the road shows, it is the team who's showing that. And it has led to not building Sangram here LLC, like that is what would have ended up becoming, and actually build a company that is around people, around values, around what we want to do. So there is a lot of upbringing and the immigrant mindset around the fact of looking forward. But if I'm being dead honest about it, I think faith has probably more than anything else to do with it.
That's great. And so, yeah, let's kind of come full circle here. Like, what is the idea behind go-to-market partners, and ultimately, what's this latest path gonna look like?
Well, yeah, we have taken a really opposite route of what people do. Like people don't go typically from building product companies to services. We're taking that route, having raised money to like not raising money. So I think we all can relate to a lot of those things right now. And the idea was, well, Serious Decisions Topo, when they got acquired in 2018, we feel like there's a void left in the marketplace of what is the new framework, how to think about it. And going back to the gift of what I have, and I feel like what Brian, my co-founder, has, and so the people on the team, we're really good at building new models and frameworks that will help people think about the future. And if I've done anything or learned anything from the work that I've done, is that ABM was ahead of its time, and we were good at building a community around it, a movement around it, as you said. So if you're good at that, what will it take for us to lean into that? So what we built with Go-to-Market Partners is a research and advisory firm, which is all about what's happening in go-to-market, specifically aligned with go-to-market. We're creating new models, new frameworks, and new research with our partnership with Bombora, G2, and a lot of data providers. And we're giving that to the marketplace, working with PE firms and some go-to-market companies. And then the second part of it is we're actually going to license our frameworks out to as many fractional leaders and agencies out there who want to take that and teach that to their own customers, so that our impact is go further. We don't want to build a big company of 300 people. We want to keep it to 10, 20 people and see if we can have 20, 30 agencies and fractional leaders who can take that framework and help thousands of other companies out there.
Amazing. Well, congrats on all the success. We really appreciate having you on the show. But before we let you go, I've only gotten down to you don't have a CS problem on your shirt. So I've got to understand what the full payoff is on the shirt you're wearing here.
All right. So it said you don't have a marketing problem, you don't have a sales problem, CS, or product problem. What you have, let's see if you can read it.
You have a go-to-market problem. There it is.
Indeed.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect payoff.
Yeah. So my marketing automation, my ABM, like all of them was about fixing marketing problems, fixing marketing and sales problems. But I feel like what I've learned is that what we have are go-to-market problems. So let's fix it. Not in the department. If we did, we would have stopped talking about sales and marketing alignment, but people are still talking about it. But clearly we cannot fix that problem that way. We got to frame it differently, and that's what we're doing.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining the show. Sangram, we appreciate you being on. It's good to see you again, and congratulations on the next chapter. We're certainly excited to hopefully partner with you on some of that as it moves forward. For those of you, if it's your first time listening, make sure you find Sangram on LinkedIn. He's out there. Trust me, it won't be that hard. If this is your first time listening to the show, please give us a like, a comment, something like that. Help us spread the word. For Justin and Josh, this has been The Cheat Code.